A large, chaotic brawl.
It just grows and grows and grows.
Shocking attacks.
Do these people have a gun?
Fearless heroes.
A fast-acting security guard.
He was going in there to shoot people.
And unbelievable attempts to escape.
He throws a curveball.
The best part of this viral video is him on his knees pleading.
We're covering news that is getting national attention.
Out of nowhere, they blindside him.
This story went instantly mega viral.
This riverboat fight was the biggest viral thing to happen in 2023.
August 5th, 2023, Montgomery, Alabama. It's a sultry day, and the riverfront is packed with tourists. The Harriet II, a dinner cruise boat, is trying to return to the dock.
There's a little pontoon boat that's blocking where this boat is supposed to park.
This boat had been trying to dock for 45 minutes.
The frustrated co-captain, Damian Pickett, takes a dinghy to the dock to try and speed things up.
We got off our ship to move that black pontoon boat on his own.
But that infuriates the pontoon passengers, who are busy partying nearby.
The folks who own the private boat, they're there on a leisure day. They were drinking. They were just hanging out.
Tensions quickly escalate to obscene gestures.
You can tell by their body language that this is not just a pleasant conversation.
Ooh, confrontation with the owner of the boat.
They were being dismissive, they were being disrespectful, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of people thought they were doing that because he was black.
Get out the way! Get out the way!
Now, dozens of people are recording on their phones.
You have a man who is by himself facing a group of people who are increasingly becoming hostile.
That's when things turn.
This guy comes running into frame and attacks the man.
Out of nowhere, they blindside him and then just punch him right in his face.
His reaction was really unexpected. The first thing he does is he takes off his hat and he throws it in the air, like this is the sign to the world that it's about to go down.
I feel like collectively, most black people saw that as like a Wakanda moment.
The situation has become physical, and the boat captain is heavily outnumbered.
At one point, this captain has 6 guys surrounding him, just attacking him, pummeling him. He's on the ground. You can see people are trying to get to him as fast as they can.
Then, the most unexpected thing I've ever seen in any viral video happened.
They wrong for that now. That boy swimming his over there. Get out there, young buck.
This man is swimming from the boat to the dock so that he can help this man. I mean, this has got to be the most loyal coworker in the history of the world. If your coworkers aren't down for you like this, you need new coworkers.
The swimming coworker gets to the dock just as the fight dies down. But as Captain Pickett walks away, bystanders come to his aid, reigniting the fight.
It becomes a big group melee. It just grows and grows and grows.
Obviously, my first instinct is, do these people have a gun? Somebody's gonna grab a gun and it's gonna turn. This could go really, really bad.
Now come about that boat, baby. They ready to move out.
When the Harriet does finally manage to dock, it becomes complete chaos.
Oh my God. Oh! In the water. In the water.
When police show up, they struggle to control the melee.
The man with the folding chair. starts hitting people like this is WWE, like this is wrestling.
It takes 20 minutes for things to simmer down. Videos of the wild scene immediately go viral.
The city of Montgomery, Alabama is on edge after a large, chaotic brawl broke out there over the weekend.
When that ferry finally docked, some passengers joining in on the fight. One man seen swinging a chair.
Authorities interviewed dozens of people. 5 are charged with assault, harassment, or disorderly conduct. They're all convicted. A few get short prison sentences. Others are ordered to take anger management classes or do community service. Surprisingly, Captain Pickett is also charged with third-degree assault, a charge that is eventually dismissed. On social media, people go to town with memes.
On your left. Homeboy picked me up and we just started doing charity. We donating ass whoopers to anybody who needed it.
The reason that we can laugh at it is because no one got seriously hurt. Nobody pulled out a knife, nobody pulled out a gun, nobody died.
Don't think because we chairs we don't stand on business.
The viral incident infuriates people across the globe.
The riverboat fight was the biggest thing to happen in 2023.
But there's admiration for the way Captain Pickett's co-workers leapt to his defense.
It was nice to see collectively a group coming together to protect, because they knew in that instant who was in the wrong and who was in the right. And so I think just collectively, we felt good about it.
In this next viral clip, it's the cops who come together to catch a criminal with an unusual getaway tactic.
We've seen a lot of wild pursuits in Southern California.
He's got the element of surprise.
February 13th, 2023, Los Angeles, California. It's early morning when a 911 caller reports a robbery.
There's been a truck and trailer stolen. They're on the lookout for it now, and they identify it.
What's the primary?
Adam 55.
I love anything that happens in downtown Los Angeles. It's basically like playing GTA. You know it's gonna be a lit video when it's in downtown.
Police tailed the truck to get a closer look at its plates.
Whenever you have a stolen vehicle, you're wondering, why did this person steal this vehicle in the first place? Was there another crime already committed? Are they in possession of weapons? So there's a lot of variables that you're considering when you decide to actually light them up and attempt to pull them over.
But this thief is determined to get away.
He takes off.
He doesn't have much room to negotiate.
At speeds of more than 60 miles an hour, police are in hot pursuit down narrow residential streets. And then...
TC.
As the officers yell TC for traffic collision, the driver takes off again. And this chase is about to take a very viral turn. Police in LA are chasing a driver who is trying to flee in a stolen truck.
We're gonna be in pursuit.
Seatbelt.
I don't even know if he knows where he's going.
Even a crash doesn't stop this guy, so air reinforcements are called in.
The one thing we know about car chases, especially in LA, there's gonna be a helicopter somewhere.
It's not just this one person that's chasing after this vehicle, it's a coordinated effort. They're trying to box this person in to cut off potential escape routes.
If he starts getting too crazy,
You're trying to weigh the pros of catching this person for the crime they committed versus the dangers it poses to the surrounding area.
Down by 355 is in pursuit of a code 37.
And then
he hits something, the truck just spins out.
Our from 4, the information is back under supervisor. Hey, stop!
armed officers surround the disabled truck.
We have the advantage, but he throws a curveball.
It's a skateboard.
I guess if you think I have wheels, it's faster than my feet. But the reality is, unless your skateboard is from Back to the Future and you're Michael J. Fox, you are not getting away on a skateboard.
And when a patrol car pulls in front of him, it's game over.
Relax. Give me your hand. Give me your hand. Give me your hand. Sorry, don't be sorry. Just give us your hand. That's it. Relax. Relax.
Police release the video to the media, and it quickly goes viral.
You've never seen a getaway like this.
That driver taking off again, this time on a skateboard.
30-year-old Pedro Villalobos is arrested, treated at a local hospital for a leg injury, and charged with 2 counts of vehicle theft and reckless evading. Ultimately, he gets 2 years probation.
Once you get into the police pursuit, then you decide to resist arrest. You're just building up charges as you go.
And for the LAPD, it's a chase to remember.
There's been so many times where I've been chasing someone in a vehicle and they get out on foot, but I've never seen a situation where they get out of 4 wheels and hop on another 4 wheels.
On the other side of the country, a criminal is hiding something far more ominous than a skateboard in his car.
Tonight to a close call in Tampa.
This really towering figure comes around the corner.
I knew it's life and death. He had it chambered, ready to go.
He wasn't afraid to go after this guy.
March 19th, 2023, Tampa, Florida. It's a busy Saturday at the world-renowned Mons Venus Strip Club, and more than 200 people are inside.
This is a very regular night at a club. There's no problems.
Manny Resto, a former professional wrestler and 30-year veteran in security, is stationed by the front door.
We have 2 other security guys, and we try to stay separated so we cover all the areas. I noticed that a truck came in the parking lot and was blocking all the other parked vehicles, and it was running.
Something about the car instinctively worries Manny. And then,
all of a sudden, this really towering figure comes around the corner.
It was a guy with a mask. I thought, okay, is this one of my wrestling buddies, MMA buddies, security buddies playing a joke on me?
But this is no prank.
They have a red devil mask on, they're walking up to the door, and that's when this situation takes a dark turn.
I saw him raise his right arm up, and he had the Glock.
Manny is unarmed, but he can't let this man get inside.
He had a flashlight in one hand and the Glock in the other. He was going in there to shoot people and keep on shooting. I was thinking, get the gun out of his hand and get him on the floor.
As terrified bystanders flee, Manny is determined to stop the masked giant.
He's 6'5", 400 pounds. I am 5'11", 250. He's a big man.
The man pistol whips Manny so violently he can barely think.
I was actually unconscious, punch drunk on my feet, but I knocked the gun out of his hand.
Suddenly, the man runs away. But as soon as Manny grabs the gun, he's back.
I didn't know if he had knives in his pocket. I didn't know what he had.
Now, everyone inside the club is in grave danger. When a masked gunman tries to enter a strip club in Tampa, former pro wrestler Manny Resto jumps into action to restrain him. And now, as two other security guards hold the man down, Manny pummels him.
I pistol whipped him a lot of times. I bashed his head in. I took teeth out of his mouth with my foot. I broke my foot. I did what I had to do to keep him down. No one was going to get killed on my watch.
Inside, a frantic employee calls for help. Police arrive within minutes and immediately arrest 44-year-old Michael Rudman. In his truck, they make an alarming discovery: 9 knives, numerous rounds of ammunition, and other firearm accessories.
This individual's going there with a target in mind. This could have been a catastrophic situation.
He told them he heard voices, and the voices told him to go inside and punish the sinners.
His ink is also concerning.
He had the dark one, and the other, he had Son of Satan and 666, and they were like homemade tattoo jobs, like carved in.
Making it even scarier is the revelation that this was a targeted attack.
He was casing all of the clubs the night before. Our video cameras show that he came in as a customer. You know, he wanted to be famous the wrong way.
Rudman is charged with multiple offenses, including aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, and possession of cocaine. He's also ordered to undergo a mental health evaluation. The frightening incident instantly makes news.
Tonight, to a close call in Tampa, police say fast-acting security guards likely stopped a mass shooting.
Manny's heroism becomes a viral sensation.
People come up telling me, "Thank you, my son was in the club that night. You saved his life. My daughter was in there."
I truly believe that if that security guard hadn't intervened, we would have had a mass casualty event.
The city of Tampa honors Manny with a Medal of Valor, an award rarely given to a private citizen. And he's relieved he was able to keep an important promise.
My club is run by women, and back when Pulse happened in Orlando, when all those people were killed, they were really scared and frightened, and I made an oath to all of them. I said, as long as I'm in that club, I will never allow a shooter to kill anybody. Even if it costs me my life, my job, or I get incarcerated, it's never gonna happen. And I lived up to my oath.
At a cell phone store in Texas, an employee's quick thinking saves the day.
The video people have been sharing all day.
That crook locked inside of the store.
At that point, it was too late.
April 17th, 2017, Houston, Texas. A customer with a baby stroller is counting her change when an armed robber walks in behind her.
This suspect walks into the store, goes to the back.
This gunman could have taken this woman or taken her child hostage. This could have been a really dangerous situation.
There are bullets in this gun. This could have been tragic.
Hey! Open it. No.
But the women who work here are oddly calm.
No.
She puts her hand on her hip, and she's like, oh no, we're not doing this again.
It turns out they know this guy. He robbed them just 2 weeks earlier.
He was in that store and got away with a lot. And this time, they weren't going to have it.
The unsuspecting thief is in for a rude shock. When he walks to the back, Karina Leone, in the black and white shirt, swiftly ushers everyone out. bolts the door from the outside, locking him in.
This time, he's not going to get away.
He has no place to go. He starts to become frantic.
And that's when the weapon comes out.
Now, he's putting people outside and himself in danger. He's so close to the door, the bullets could ricochet right back at him. Luckily, he decides to stop firing.
Please, I have nothing. Please.
No one has pity for this man. This is someone who entered a store and started harassing innocent people with a gun.
It doesn't matter what you say, what you do. The only way that you're coming out is if someone is coming to get you out.
Get your hands up! On the ground! On the ground! On the ground! On the ground! All the way down!
Although he got away after the previous robbery attempt, this time John Bell is charged with aggravated robbery with a deadly weapon and sentenced to 5 years. As the crime goes viral, social media pokes fun at him for trying to shoot his way out of a store that he tried to rob twice.
The best part of this viral video is him on his knees pleading, somebody let me out. Normally, the roles are reversed.
Karina, the woman who bravely locked him in, tells reporters she was afraid for her life.
I don't know if he has a family, I don't know if he has kids, but I have a family too, you know. I could have been shot. We could have been shot.
At the end of the day, maybe he realized how big of a mistake was made.
Horrifying explosions.
It's a terrifying scene.
Crumbling right before your eyes.
Got ladies still in there?
It's one of the scariest scenarios out there.
Women with deadly intentions.
Does everybody want to die today?
Got shots fired up here.
She's armed and dangerous, and she knows how to use it.
Frightening viral videos that will leave your jaw on the ground.
This scene is unbelievable.
Situations like this can escalate and really quickly.
She's making demands. There's no calming this person down.
December 4th, 2018, Garland, Texas. It's business as usual at a local bank until one customer suddenly loses her cool.
You can hear sort of the desperation in her voice. She was obviously on edge.
She's clearly asking for something that's not being given to her.
People start recording on their phones as the woman's rant turns ominous.
Now it's become a terrorist threat.
The person who is trying to help in this situation is trying to de-escalate what's happening.
It doesn't work. This woman is not playing.
I'm here to rob this.
There's no calming this person down. She is demanding money over and over again.
An employee frantically calls for help.
Open the safe!
Watching this woman, you just wonder, what does it take for a person to get to this level where they're walking into a bank, demanding the safe be open?
Does everybody want to die today?
Is this woman to be taken seriously? Is she hiding a weapon? brave customers step in to assist with the volatile situation.
I just don't concern me. This doesn't matter. This is not your fight. I'm broke and I need some money. That's what y'all need to do is open up the thing.
She's making demands. She's talking about a personal situation, things that she wants. You can make demands of anything that you want. It's just a matter of who's on the other side and how are they going to respond to this.
I'm broke and I need some money because I need some money. Y'all don't understand that I need money right now. I'm gonna blow this bitch up and everybody in this.
Does she really think that just by making threats and threatening to bomb the place, essentially, and everyone inside of it, that is going to force them to open up the safe?
The woman is having a full-on tantrum.
She is there on a mission, trying to get something, but it's not working very well.
After 5 minutes, the employee who has been patiently trying to control her manages to guide her out of the bank.
He really kept everyone calm, which is important in this situation.
And it turns out her scary threats were nothing but talk.
The only weapon she has is her purse.
Video of the wild outburst goes viral with millions of views. And there are plenty of comments from people who say they relate to her desperate pleas.
Watching this video, it feels like you could be this woman. Everyone is dealing with money problems. We have a recession. You know, you're trying to buy eggs, and it just feels like I'm just gonna go to a bank and I want them to give me money. She's really lucky things didn't turn violent. She's really lucky that the security officer that was working that day is the one that she got.
The woman, Katie Johnson, is arrested and charged with bank robbery. She's sentenced to 36 months.
Thankfully, in this situation, no one was injured, and the outcome was as positive as it could be.
But you won't believe the outcome of this next shocking viral video.
This Virginia home reduced to rubble.
Massive home explosion.
It was really traumatizing. Something out of an action movie.
December 4th, 2023, Arlington, Virginia.
It's Northern Virginia, a very high-end area outside of D.C., very expensive, nice homes.
Emily Saxon has lived here for just a few months.
It's a very quiet little corner of Arlington. It's kind of off the main drag of all the bars and restaurants.
She's looking forward to getting home after a busy workday as a nurse when she sees something shocking.
There was local news that was reporting that there was a man in the neighborhood who was sending flare signals outside of his window.
A police officer just so happened to be sitting there when he noticed flares going up.
When Emily gets to her neighborhood, there's a flurry of commotion at a house a block away from hers.
The person inside not cooperating, refusing to come outside. SWAT is brought in. You're thinking, what is this going to be, a shootout? Do they have firearms? Do they have other explosives that are more lethal than just the flare?
Emily decides to stay inside her house, where she believes she'll be safe.
It was really scary. Everyone that lives on that street felt panic.
The intense standoff with the barricaded man goes on for more than 3 hours. When
what's most disturbing about this story is this could really happen anywhere.
December 4th, 2023. A 3-hour standoff with police ends when a house in Arlington, Virginia is violently torn apart in a powerful explosion.
Initially, I'm thinking this has got to be like a gas leak or something.
When I felt it, I was laying back on my couch and I physically recoiled forward and like my book fell out of my hand.
Emily nervously walks outside to find out what's happened.
I round the corner and I see the mushroom cloud explosion fire. And I just see a swarm of people outside. The whole neighborhood was just, I think, in a state of shock.
Now, Emily is terrified.
That's like something just crumbling right before your eyes. What if a second blast happens?
Luckily, it doesn't. And after a tense night, police hold a press conference to reassure everyone.
There's no ongoing threat to the community related to this incident.
They also identify the man as the owner of the house, 56-year-old James Yu. He's presumed dead. They are still investigating, but Yu is someone who was on their radar.
The individual had previously communicated with the FBI via phone calls, online tips, and letters over a number of years. Primarily complaints about alleged frauds he believed were perpetrated against him.
A paranoid individual who had been calling the FBI and making complaints for an extended period of time.
The cause of the explosion is still unknown. The fire department had turned the gas off, and officials were exercising caution as they tried to coax the suspect out.
Officers began to deploy non-flammable, less lethal chemical munitions to multiple areas in hopes of compelling the suspect to surrender.
What's perplexing about this situation is we'll probably never know what the true intention of the suspect was.
The explosive video quickly goes viral.
Let's get to that massive home explosion in Virginia that happened as police tried to talk a barricaded man out.
And the ordeal leaves Emily shaken.
For it to get so viral and then for it to be global news, for it to happen in this seemingly like perfect neighborhood. The whole message was really that you just never know who your neighbors are. Everyone is a stranger.
Across the country in Texas, a driver plows into a suburban house, trapping the homeowners inside.
Officers were approaching the home when it exploded.
I just remember a big heat wave.
It's one of the scariest scenarios out there.
April 7th, 2018, Hurst, Texas. A peaceful Saturday is about to be shattered.
You have a family inside their home. You have to think that's the safest place you can be. Then a car crashes into the home.
Hurst 911. A truck just ran into my house. It's in my house. All right, I'm going to be getting some help out that way, but you're not hurt? No, but I'm trapped in the corner of my room.
The 61-year-old cowers inside the room where the truck slammed into the house. Her terror made worse by not knowing what has happened to her husband or adult son, who were also home. When officers pull up a few minutes later, something seems off.
You see the driver standing very calmly off to the side.
Officer Travis Heiser immediately steps out to investigate.
If he had gotten out there 2 minutes earlier, he would have been blown up.
Are you all right?
222 to us. You copy that? We had explosion in the house. You okay? Yeah.
This was not a tiny explosion. This was a massive explosion. You can see the roof of the house blowing off.
As they get their bearings, officers panic.
That lady's still in there? Is the caller still in there?
She's in there?
Get back to up in the house! Back! Come on! I'm coming!
Hey, medics in the back! Someone's in the back!
Officers find the couple's dazed son at the back of the home. When they rescue his parents, his dad is covered in soot, and his mom is frantic.
My dog!
Moments later, the family dog is also pulled to safety. Emergency calls flood in from concerned neighbors.
First 911.
Yeah, I think a house exploded. First 911. I heard like the horrible loud boom. Yeah, we're taking care of it. We got it under control.
With everyone out of the house and the fire department handling the blaze, police turn their attention to the driver of the truck.
Did you hit your head when you had this accident? When you crashed, did you hit your head?
Oh. Alejandro Castro tells police his brakes fail, but then confesses that he's been drinking.
What did you drink? Oh, me? Yes. Me? Yes. 2, 3.
About an hour ago, or what?
1 hour. Yeah.
Castro passes a field sobriety test, but he has a previous conviction for driving while intoxicated.
You don't have a Texas driver's license or anything? I don't find that. No.
There are questions about whether he should have even been driving at all.
He's arrested, then transferred to federal custody on an immigration hold. It turns out that when the SUV careened into the house, it ruptured a gas line.
99.9% of the time, gas lines do exactly what they're supposed to do. But there are cases where they will cause an entire home to go up in a fireball in a split second. It's one of the scariest scenarios out there.
In fact, the mother suffers second-degree burns to 30% of her body. Incredibly, everyone else, including the family dog, survives.
This family is lucky that they got out alive, but they still suffered tremendous loss.
As for the first responders, several have to be treated for minor injuries. Officer Heiser tells reporters it's a miracle nobody died.
There was definitely some divine intervention that was reaching down. Otherwise, it would have exploded completely into my face.
Video of the frightening explosion goes viral.
What's so scary about this is how quickly circumstances in life can change. In 1 second, in the middle of a Saturday, their entire world changed.
Coming up next.
Start EMS.
A shocking video captures what happens when a loaded weapon falls into the wrong hands.
This scene is unbelievable.
A woman slipped her handcuffs. It's an AR-15 assault rifle.
Start EMS. Start EMS. What the heck?
August 12th, 2022, Bridge Creek, Oklahoma. A man calls the cops about a woman who is in his yard, behaving bizarrely.
He wakes up seeing her barking like a dog in his front lawn. Something is not right here.
When police arrive, they immediately handcuff Rachel Clay. and put her in the back seat of a patrol car.
The deputy is taking a report from the homeowner. They're having a simple conversation, and all of a sudden, gunfire rings out.
What was that?
Where is this coming from? It's coming from out of the blue.
Gunshots hit two people, not just the witness, but also one of the officers was grazed.
Danny, I'm hit right here. I'm hit right here too, Danny. Hit in the head.
They're not really sure what's happening next.
The homeowner, who has been shot in the chest, is bleeding but still talking to officers.
This is unbelievable. This victim is hit in the chest. He's able to walk, continue moving, goes over, finds cover.
What is going on? How is this man able to still be standing?
As 9 more shots ring out, it's mayhem, with everyone scrambling for safety.
County, we got shots fired up here. We need backup immediately. Start EMS. Start EMS. We got a civilian. Got a civilian hit. What the heck?
The cops are just confused. They're thinking, the woman's apprehended. Why is a random person now shooting at us?
What they don't realize is that inside the patrol car, Clay has managed to get her hands free.
You're placing someone in handcuffs. You can't imagine that they're able to finagle their way or figure out a way out of them.
And then she finds a compartment labeled gun, and the gun is what she grabs. She's now armed and dangerous.
Get out of her cuffs.
This is an AR-15 rifle, a very powerful weapon, and she knows how to use it.
Got a civilian hit.
Hearing the gunfire, the man's shocked son races outside.
Shots fired. Get over here. Get over here. Your dad's hit, man. He got hit. Dad, he got hit. Get out, Joey. Dad, are you okay?
As backup arrives, he is rushed to the hospital.
It just happened so quickly and so fast.
But this isn't over yet. Clay barricades herself inside the car.
She was in the cop car, taping up all the windows so no one could see what was going on.
She stays there for 3.5 hours until it all comes to a dramatic end, with news choppers capturing police breaking out the back window.
The tense standoff lasted hours.
She slipped her handcuffs and then fired off a round of shots.
The video goes viral, racking up millions of views.
The question on all of our minds is, why and how was she able to access this rifle?
It turns out that the glass partition was partially open because of the heat.
The air condition was on, and for the air to be able to reach the person in the back, the window was open.
They didn't think she was gonna reach for a gun.
Luckily, the 2 people Clay hit, the homeowner and a deputy whose head was grazed by a bullet, recover from their injuries.
She had good aim. These bullets really could cause major harm or death.
Clay is charged with 3 felony counts of shooting with intent to kill.
She was supposed to be medicated because of some mental health issues, and she was off her medication, and that is what led us to this scenario.
But she is deemed competent to stand trial. And there's a surprising turn when reporters reveal an unexpected plot twist.
Rachel Clay and the man they say she shot met the night before.
They knew each other for a short time.
The man who was shot is actually the one who brought the shooter into his own home. You never really know who you're meeting and what their ulterior motives could be. Stranger danger, we teach kids about that, but it's something that adults have to worry about too.
On a quiet summer morning in northern Germany, near the rural stretch of road,
close to Damerlohausen and the lake region of Dummer in Niedersachsen. Two hunters came across a scene that would later remain frozen in time within one of the region's most persistent unsolved murder files. There was no dramatic disturbance in the landscape, no immediate sign of chaos that usually signals violent death in the public imagination. Only the unsettling stillness of a red Volkswagen Golf parked along an isolated road where such a vehicle did not belong, and a man lying nearby, motionless, as if he had simply collapsed into the earth and never moved again. The date was August 8th, 1996, and in that moment, nothing about the scene suggested explanation. Only consequence. The man would later be identified as Nenad Gajdanovic, known by the nickname Gajo, a figure who, according to investigative records, had moved within the margins of criminal life in northern Germany. He was not known publicly as a prominent figure of power or notoriety, but rather as someone who existed in the shadows of a fragmented and shifting criminal landscape shaped heavily by the aftermath of the Yugoslav wars and the migration flows of the 1990s. In those years, Germany had become a crossroads for individuals connected to a wide spectrum of survival economies, illicit trade, and loosely structured organized networks that were often defined less by hierarchy and more by fluid alliances, mistrust, and constant internal instability. Gajdanovic, according to the available investigative understanding, was believed to have had associations within this environment, potentially acting in intermediary roles or participating in smaller-scale criminal activity such as burglary or facilitation between groups. His life was described as mobile, lacking a stable long-term residence, with movement between Hamburg and regions in Niedersachsen, including Oldenburg, where he was reportedly seen shortly before his death. Those final days before the discovery of his body form a shadowed corridor of uncertainty. He was said to have been staying in or passing through a hotel in Oldenburg, and there were indications that his behavior had shifted, that he had become more cautious, more alert, possibly aware that he was being observed or followed. Nothing in the documented record clearly explains what he believed he was facing, but the pattern suggests a man navigating increasing pressure, a man whose movements were no longer casual but measured, as though each step carried potential consequence. When the hunters encountered the scene, there was no immediate clarity regarding what had taken place. The Volkswagen Golf, red in color, stood as a silent marker of recent human presence, but not of struggle. There were no signs of a traffic accident, no fire damage, no chaotic collision with the surrounding environment. The body of Gajdanovic was positioned outside the vehicle, and the absence of obvious disturbance suggested that whatever had occurred happened quickly and deliberately. When authorities arrived and began their initial assessment, the condition of the body provided the first definitive direction: multiple gunshot wounds, inflicted at close range, with fatal impact to critical areas of the body, including the chest and head region. The nature of the injuries immediately separated this case from accidental death or spontaneous violence. This was controlled, deliberate, and executed with precision. There was no indication of prolonged physical struggle, no defensive injuries suggesting a drawn-out fight, and no evidence that the victim had been able to effectively resist once the confrontation began. The crime scene itself reinforced this interpretation. The surrounding area, isolated and lacking in civilian activity, provided an environment where such an act could be carried out without interruption or witnesses. The absence of robbery further deepened the mystery. Nothing suggested that theft was the motive. No clear personal belongings appeared to have been taken or disturbed in a manner consistent with opportunistic crime. Instead, everything pointed toward intent, toward a decision that had been made prior to arrival at the location, a meeting that was not accidental but arranged or anticipated. In the early phase of the investigation, Law enforcement authorities began assembling fragments of Gajanovic's life in order to understand how he arrived at this remote road in Niedersachsen and why he died there in such a methodical manner. What emerged was not a linear narrative, but a mosaic of partial information, reflecting a man whose connections extended into environments where documentation is minimal and silence is often enforced by fear. Investigators noted his association with criminal circles linked to individuals of Balkan origin operating in Germany during the post-Yugoslav period, a time when the collapse of national structures in Southeast Europe had contributed to the formation of dispersed networks abroad. These networks were not uniform. They varied in structure, purpose, and stability. But they often shared common characteristics, such as internal volatility, competition over resources, and the frequent use of violence as a mechanism of resolution. Within this context, Gajanovic was not necessarily positioned as a leader, but rather as someone operating within or adjacent to these systems, possibly as a facilitator, a participant in smaller illicit operations, or a person who moved between groups. In the days leading up to the murder, his presence in Oldenburg and his movement through the region became a key focal point. Witness accounts, though limited and fragmented, suggested that he had been seen in transitional spaces, including a hotel, and that his demeanor may have reflected heightened caution. These details, while not definitive, contributed to a developing hypothesis that he was aware of risk, or at minimum, operating under conditions of uncertainty. The transition from life to death, from movement to stillness, occurred on that isolated road on August 8th, where the physical evidence indicated a swift and decisive act of violence. For investigators, the challenge was not only reconstructing what happened at the scene, but also understanding the invisible chain of events that led him there. The absence of clear witnesses, combined with the rural nature of the location, meant that the investigation would rely heavily on circumstantial reconstruction and the slow accumulation of testimonies over time. From the earliest stages, one central observation shaped the direction of inquiry. The execution-style nature of the killing suggested planning rather than improvisation. The positioning of the vehicle, the selection of a location, and the manner of death all pointed toward a controlled encounter. Yet the identity of those involved and the reason for the encounter remained completely obscured. As the initial shock of discovery faded and procedural investigation began, the case entered its earliest phase of formal inquiry, one defined by uncertainty and the gradual recognition that this was not a straightforward homicide. It was, instead, a case embedded in a wider network of human relationships, many of which were concealed by time, geography, and silence. In the absence of immediate answers, the death of Nenad Gajanovic became the starting point of a much larger question that would extend across decades. Who would arrange such an execution? And what sequence of events could lead a man to a quiet road in rural Germany, only to disappear from life without a witness willing to speak openly about what truly happened in those final moments? The life of Nenad Gajanovic, known by the nickname Gajo, does not emerge from official records as the life of a public figure, but rather as a fragmented outline reconstructed through investigative files, witness statements, and the cautious interpretations of law enforcement officers who spent years trying to map the invisible contours of his world. Born around 1961 in the former Yugoslavia, Gajanovic came of age during a period of increasing political tension and eventual fragmentation in Southeast Europe, a backdrop that would later send waves of migration across Europe, including into Germany. By the time he was living in Hamburg, he was part of a broader diaspora that included workers, refugees, and individuals who had left behind not only a collapsing state structure, but also, in some cases, criminal affiliations that would later reassemble themselves in foreign cities under new conditions. In Hamburg, Gajanovic was not described as a public-facing figure of influence, nor as someone operating with visible authority within any structured organization. Instead, he appears in the investigative narrative as a man who moved between spaces, sometimes connected to burglary activity in northern Germany, sometimes associated with individuals suspected of belonging to organized criminal groups, and often difficult to place within any fixed hierarchy. This ambiguity is important because it reflects the nature of the environment in which he operated, a world where roles were fluid, trust was temporary, and relationships were often defined by immediate necessity rather than long-term loyalty. Authorities investigating his background would later characterize him as someone potentially involved in intermediary roles, a facilitator or contact point who may have connected different actors within illicit operations. Such roles, while not necessarily high-ranking, are often among the most vulnerable positions in criminal ecosystems because they involve exposure to multiple sides without the protection of formal structure. What makes Gajanovic's profile particularly significant in the context of his eventual death is not any confirmed position of power, but rather the combination of mobility and exposure. He did not appear to maintain a fixed residence for extended periods, instead moving between Hamburg and other regions such as Niedersachsen, including Oldenburg. This mobility suggests either operational necessity or personal instability, both of which can increase risk in environments where movement is tracked and interpreted by others with suspicion. In the months leading up to August 1996, investigators later reconstructed that Gajanovic had been seen in the Oldenburg area, including possible stays in or around a hotel. These sightings, though limited in detail, became important markers in the timeline of his final days. Witness accounts indicated that his behavior during this period may have shifted. He was described as more cautious, more reserved, and less visible in public spaces than previously. While these descriptions are not precise enough to establish intent or awareness, they contribute to an impression of a man operating under heightened awareness of risk. Whether this caution was due to a specific threat, a general understanding of the environment he was in, or internal conflicts within the networks he was associated with, remains unknown. What is clear from the investigative reconstruction is that Gajanovic's environment in the 1990s was shaped by a broader historical and geopolitical transformation. The collapse of Yugoslavia and the ensuing conflicts created a diaspora that extended across Europe. And within that diaspora, new forms of criminal organization began to emerge. These were not always centralized organizations in the traditional sense, but often decentralized networks built on regional ties, shared origin, and opportunistic cooperation. In Germany, particularly in cities like Hamburg, these networks intersected with existing criminal structures and local illicit economies, creating a complex and sometimes volatile landscape. Within this environment, individuals like Gajanovic could find themselves involved in activities ranging from low-level theft to more structured operations, depending on opportunity and association. However, the same environment that provided opportunity also carried significant danger, particularly for those who moved between groups or occupied intermediary roles without strong protection from any single faction. The final confirmed phase of Gajanovic's life took place in this context of movement and uncertainty. His presence in Oldenburg shortly before his death places him within a geographic corridor between urban and rural environments, a transition zone that often features in criminal encounters due to its relative isolation and reduced surveillance. The fact that he was later found near Damerlohausen, far from dense urban infrastructure, aligns with patterns seen in cases where individuals are brought to secluded areas for controlled encounters. However, Investigators did not establish a definitive sequence of events leading up to his arrival at the crime scene. There is no confirmed record of who he met, what arrangements were made, or whether he traveled voluntarily or under coercion. This absence of clarity is one of the defining characteristics of the case. The investigative focus, therefore, shifted toward reconstructing behavioral indicators rather than direct evidence. Gajanovic's mobility, his reported caution in the days before his death, and his known associations within criminal circles formed the foundation of the victim profile. Authorities attempted to understand whether he was under pressure, whether he had conflicts within the groups he was associated with, or whether he had become a liability within a network that operated on secrecy and internal discipline. However, no single theory could be conclusively supported. What remained consistent across all investigative perspectives was the recognition that Gajanovic was not a random victim of violence. His background, associations, and movements all suggested that he was embedded in a social environment where disputes were often resolved outside formal legal structures, and where silence after such events was common due to fear of retaliation or complicity. This context is essential to understanding why the case became so difficult to solve in later years. The lack of stable, cooperative witness testimony, combined with the transnational nature of the networks involved, created significant barriers to investigation. People who might have had information were either unwilling to come forward or were no longer accessible within the jurisdiction. Over time, these conditions contributed to the gradual cooling of the case, as leads diminished and investigative momentum slowed. Yet even within this uncertainty, certain patterns remained visible. A man moving through unstable environments, increasing caution in his final days. In a social context where violence could be both sudden and highly organized. These elements formed the foundation upon which the investigation into his death would later be built, and they also shaped the enduring mystery that surrounds his final movements. On the morning of August 8, 1996, the rural landscape near Damerlohausen in Niedersachsen offered nothing unusual to the outside eye. It was a region defined by quiet roads, open fields, and stretches of land where human presence felt intermittent rather than constant. It was precisely this kind of environment that, in hindsight, would later be recognized as ideal for a controlled act of violence, isolated enough to avoid witnesses, accessible enough to allow a quick departure, and ordinary enough that nothing about it would immediately signal danger. It was here along one of these unremarkable roads near the Dummer Lake region but the final moments of Nenad Gajanovic unfolded. The sequence of events leading to his death has never been fully reconstructed with certainty, but the physical evidence recovered at the scene provides a narrow and chilling outline of what occurred. A red Volkswagen Golf stood parked on or near the roadside, not in a manner consistent with mechanical failure or accident, but in a position that suggested a deliberate stop. Nearby, the body of Gajanovic was found, separated from the vehicle, lying in a way that indicated sudden and irreversible collapse. There were no signs of a prolonged struggle visible at the scene, no scattered evidence of a drawn-out confrontation, and no indications that the area had been disturbed beyond the immediate act itself. When law enforcement arrived and began their initial assessment, the first priority was to determine whether this was a roadside execution, a stage scene, or a spontaneous act of violence. Very quickly, the injuries told a clear story. Gajanovic had been shot multiple times. The wounds were consistent with close-range gunfire, with fatal impacts to vital areas, including the chest and head. This detail immediately shifted the classification of the case away from accident or incidental death and toward intentional homicide. The precision and severity of the injuries suggested that the shooter or shooters had intended to ensure death, not merely to incapacitate or intimidate. In cases where firearms are used in chaotic or unplanned encounters, trajectories and distances often vary widely, but here the pattern was controlled and decisive. This was not a struggle that escalated into violence. It was violence that appears to have been the primary objective from the outset. The positioning of the vehicle added another layer of interpretation. The red Volkswagen Golf showed no evidence of being involved in a high-speed collision, nor did it bear signs of fire or structural destruction. Its presence was functional rather than accidental, implying that it may have been used to transport Gajdanovic to the location or that it was already present as part of a prearranged meeting. Investigators noted the absence of typical indicators of opportunistic crime. There was no clear evidence of theft, no indication that valuables had been forcibly taken in a chaotic manner, and no visible signs that the scene had been ransacked. This absence of secondary motive strengthened the early working hypothesis that the killing was not random, but rather targeted and intentional. As the forensic examination continued, additional details reinforced this interpretation. The lack of defensive wounds suggested that Gajdanovic either did not have time to react or was taken by surprise in a way that prevented effective resistance. The distribution of injuries and the proximity implied by the gunshot wounds pointed toward an execution-style killing, where the victim is restrained, controlled, or otherwise rendered unable to escape before being shot. This type of violence is often associated with deliberate killings in organized criminal contexts, where efficiency and certainty of outcome are prioritized over emotional expression or symbolic messaging. However, in this case, no explicit message was left at the scene. There were no written threats, no symbolic markings, and no overt indication of which group or individual might be responsible. This silence became one of the defining features of the case. The investigation quickly expanded beyond the immediate scene into attempts to reconstruct Gajdanovic's movements in the days and hours leading up to his death. One of the key confirmed points was his presence in the broader Oldenburg area shortly before the murder. Witness accounts, though limited and often lacking precise detail, placed him in transitional spaces such as hotels or temporary accommodations. These sightings, while not providing direct evidence of intent or threat, helped establish that he had been in motion and not anchored to a single secure location. Investigators attempted to determine whether he had arranged a meeting on that morning or whether he had been intercepted during travel. No definitive confirmation emerged. There was no verified account of a scheduled meeting at the exact location where his body was found, nor any confirmed record of communication that would explain why he was at that rural roadside. This absence of clarity created a critical gap in the timeline, leaving open multiple possibilities regarding how he arrived at the scene. In the immediate aftermath of the discovery, law enforcement focused on standard homicide procedures, securing the perimeter, documenting ballistic evidence, and interviewing any potential witnesses who might have been in the surrounding area. However, the rural nature of the location meant that eyewitness testimony was extremely limited. Unlike urban environments where surveillance systems and civilian presence can provide fragmented but valuable data, this stretch of Niedersachsen offered little in the way of observational support. As a result, the investigation relied heavily on forensic interpretation and broader contextual analysis of Gajdanovic's background. Early in the process, investigators began to consider the possibility that the killing was connected to organized criminal activity, particularly networks linked to individuals of Balkan origin operating in Germany during the mid-1990s. This was not based on a single piece of evidence, but rather on the convergence of several factors: the victim's known associations, the nature of the execution-style killing, and the broader pattern of similar violent incidents occurring in the same period. Within this framework, several working theories emerged, including internal disputes within criminal groups, financial disagreements involving illicit trade, or retaliatory violence stemming from prior conflicts. Despite these hypotheses, no direct link to a specific group or individual could be established in the immediate phase of the investigation. The absence of a clear suspect pool, combined with the lack of cooperative witnesses, meant that the case quickly became defined not by what was known, but by what remained unknown. The crime scene itself, though physically documented in detail, offered no immediate breakthrough. It confirmed violence, precision, and intent, but not identity or motive. As investigators processed the evidence, a central contradiction became increasingly apparent. The murder appeared highly organized in execution, yet left behind very little traceable attribution. This combination is often characteristic of cases where professional detachment is maintained during the act, and where those involved are careful to minimize exposure. Still, without corroborating testimony or forensic linkage to a known suspect, the case remained structurally open. By the end of the initial investigative phase, authorities had established the fundamental facts. Nenad Gajdanovic had been killed by multiple close-range gunshots in an isolated area near Damerlohausen, likely in a deliberate and planned encounter, with no immediate evidence of robbery or spontaneous confrontation. What remained unresolved was the identity of the perpetrator, the exact circumstances that brought him to that location, and the motive behind the killing. These unanswered questions would define not only the early investigation, but also the decades of uncertainty that followed, as the case slowly transitioned from active inquiry into one of northern Germany's enduring cold case files. In the hours and days following the discovery of Nenad Gajdanovic's body near Damerlohausen, the investigation entered a phase defined not by immediate breakthroughs, but by the slow and methodical accumulation of fragmented evidence. Law enforcement authorities in Niedersachsen began with standard homicide procedures, securing the perimeter, documenting the position of the body and the vehicle, and collecting ballistic material from the scene. The physical evidence confirmed what the initial observers had already suspected. Multiple gunshots had been fired at close range, with fatal impacts to vital regions of the body. The precision of the injuries, combined with the isolated location and absence of struggle indicators, reinforced the early conclusion that this was not a spontaneous act of violence, but a deliberate execution. However, establishing the nature of the crime was only the first step. Identifying who was responsible and why it had occurred proved significantly more complex. Investigators immediately turned to reconstructing Gajdanovic's final movements, attempting to bridge the gap between his last confirmed sightings in the Oldenburg area and his presence at the rural crime scene. Witness accounts placed him in transitional environments in the days leading up to his death, including possible stays in or near a hotel in Oldenburg. These testimonies were limited in detail and often lacked precise timestamps, but they collectively suggested that Gajdanovic had been mobile, moving between locations without a fixed base. This mobility, while not unusual in itself, became significant in the context of a homicide investigation, as it complicated efforts to establish a controlled timeline. One of the earliest investigative hypotheses focused on whether Gajdanovic had arranged to meet someone on the day of his death. The positioning of the vehicle and the remote nature of the location suggested the possibility of a prearranged encounter, potentially under false pretenses or within a criminal context where trust was conditional and often deceptive. However, despite extensive efforts, no confirmed appointment, communication record, or witness testimony emerged that directly explained why he would have been at that specific roadside near Damerlohausen. This absence of a clear trigger event created a foundational uncertainty that would persist throughout the investigation. As detectives expanded their inquiry, Attention shifted toward Gajanovic's background and associations, his known connections to individuals within criminal environments, particularly those linked to Balkan origin networks operating in Germany during the 1990s, became a central focus. These networks, shaped by the broader geopolitical collapse of Yugoslavia, were often characterized by fluid structures, overlapping loyalties, and internal volatility. Within such environments, disputes were frequently resolved outside formal legal systems, and violence was not uncommon as a means of enforcement or resolution. Investigators considered several potential scenarios within this context. One hypothesis involved internal conflict within a criminal group, where Gajanovic may have been perceived as a liability, a risk, or someone who possessed sensitive knowledge. Another theory suggested a financial dispute, possibly related to illicit trade, smuggling, or unpaid debts. A third, less emphasized but still considered, was the possibility of personal retaliation stemming from earlier criminal activities or interpersonal conflicts. Despite these lines of inquiry, no single theory could be conclusively supported by physical evidence or corroborated testimony. The investigation faced a significant obstacle in the form of witness reluctance. Over the course of the early inquiry, authorities interviewed hundreds of individuals who might have had indirect knowledge of Gajanovic's activities or social circle. However, many of these interviews yielded limited or non-actionable information. Fear of retaliation, distrust of law enforcement, and the transient nature of the individuals involved all contributed to a pattern of silence or vague recollection. In cases involving organized criminal environments, especially those spanning multiple countries and cultural communities, such silence is often not accidental but structural, reflecting the perceived risks associated with cooperation. This dynamic severely constrained the investigative process. Without reliable witness testimony, investigators were forced to rely heavily on circumstantial reconstruction and forensic interpretation. While the crime scene provided clear indicators of execution-style killing, it did not yield identifiable fingerprints of the perpetrator or any direct forensic linkage to a known suspect. Ballistic evidence confirmed the nature of the weapon use, but without a recovered firearm or traceable ownership chain, it did not point to a specific individual. Over time, the accumulation of unresolved questions began to slow the momentum of the investigation. Leads that initially appeared promising were gradually exhausted, and potential suspects identified in early stages could not be definitively connected to the crime. As months turned into years, the case transitioned from active homicide investigation into a cold case file, officially categorized as unresolved due to the absence of sufficient evidence to proceed to prosecution. During this period, Gajanovic's case became part of a broader pattern of unsolved violent incidents linked to the turbulent criminal landscape of the 1990s in Germany. Law enforcement agencies recognized that similar cases often shared structural characteristics. Victims with connections to illicit networks, crime scenes in isolated locations, and a persistent lack of cooperative witnesses. These patterns, while informative, did not resolve individual cases, but they did help contextualize them within a larger investigative framework. The passage of time further complicated the situation. As years passed, potential witnesses relocated, memories faded, and physical evidence aged, reducing the likelihood of obtaining new breakthroughs through traditional investigative methods. Nevertheless, the case was never formally closed in the sense of being forgotten. Instead, it remained preserved within archival systems, available for periodic review as new technologies or information emerged. This preservation ultimately became critical decades later, when renewed attention was directed toward unresolved homicide cases from the period. In 2024, A significant development occurred when authorities in Niedersachsen established a dedicated task force to revisit the Gajanovic case, designated informally as GAJO 96. This initiative reflected a broader shift in investigative strategy, where cold cases were re-examined using modern forensic techniques, improved data analysis methods, and renewed public engagement strategies. The task force collaborated with Europol and other international partners, recognizing that the transnational nature of the suspected criminal networks required cross-border cooperation. One of the key components of this renewed effort was a public-facing campaign, including a true crime documentary-style presentation aimed at encouraging new witnesses to come forward. This approach marked a notable shift from traditional investigative secrecy to controlled transparency, acknowledging that time had potentially altered the willingness of individuals to speak. The campaign succeeded in generating new information, though the specifics of these leads were not publicly disclosed in detail. What is known is that the renewed attention allowed investigators to re-examine earlier assumptions and identify inconsistencies or gaps in the original case file. By early 2025, this renewed investigative momentum led to a significant procedural development. Authorities confirmed that 3 individuals had been identified as potential suspects in connection with the murder. Coordinated searches were conducted in Hamburg and Sweden, reflecting the international scope of the investigation and the possibility that individuals involved may have relocated across borders. These operations resulted in the seizure of certain materials and data, though officials did not publicly specify the exact nature of the evidence recovered. Despite these developments, no arrests were immediately confirmed, and no formal charges were announced. The investigation remained ongoing, with authorities indicating that additional individuals could still be involved or that further analysis of the seized materials was required before legal action could proceed. Thus, even after decades of dormancy, the case continued to resist resolution. What emerged from this long investigative journey was a portrait of a homicide shaped by secrecy, fragmented allegiances, and the structural difficulties of pursuing justice across time and borders. The evidence suggested direction, but not conclusion, proximity, but not clarity. And as the case moved forward into renewed scrutiny, it remained suspended between past and present, still defined by the central unanswered question that had persisted since 1996. Who orchestrated the death of Nenad Gajanovic? And what chain of decisions led to that isolated road where his life ended in silence? Unlike cases that progress toward a courtroom, formal testimony, and a final judicial determination, the murder of Nenad Gajanovic never reached the stage of a completed trial. In legal terms, the case remains unresolved, with no individual formally charged and no judicial verdict delivered that would assign criminal responsibility for the killing that occurred on August 8, 1996, near Damerlohausen. This absence of a trial is not unusual in complex cold case investigations, particularly those involving suspected organized criminal networks and cross-border connections. But in this instance, it has become a defining feature of the case itself. From a perspective of the justice system, the investigation has produced partial progress without closure. The reopening of the case in 2024 and the subsequent identification of 3 potential suspects in 2025 marked significant procedural developments. Yet these steps remained within the investigative phase rather than transitioning into prosecution. As of the latest known status, no public indictment has been issued, and no court proceedings have been initiated that would allow for the presentation of evidence before a judge or jury. This legal limbo reflects the strict evidentiary standards required under German criminal law, where suspicion alone is not sufficient to proceed to trial without substantiated, admissible proof directly linking individuals to the act of murder. In the absence of such conclusive evidence, authorities have continued to treat the matter as an active investigation rather than a prosecutable case. The individuals identified as potential suspects during the 2025 investigative phase were subject to coordinated searches and evidence collection operations carried out in Hamburg and Sweden, reflecting the international scope of the inquiry. These actions were conducted with the support of Europol, indicating that law enforcement agencies consider the case to potentially involve transnational criminal elements or individuals who had moved across jurisdictions to avoid detection. During these operations, certain materials and data were seized, although the specific contents of this evidence have not been publicly disclosed. This lack of transparency is consistent with ongoing investigative practice, where premature disclosure could compromise future legal proceedings or alert additional persons of interest. Despite these developments, the absence of formal charges means that the case has not entered the adversarial phase of criminal justice. There has been no presentation of evidence in court, no cross-examination of witnesses under judicial supervision, and no legal determination of guilt or innocence. As a result, the narrative surrounding the murder of Gajdanovic remains entirely within the domain of investigative assessment rather than judicial resolution. Over the decades since the original crime, one of the key challenges preventing progression to trial has been the nature of the available evidence. The original 1996 investigation, conducted without the benefit of modern forensic technologies, produced a foundation of physical and testimonial material that was sufficient to establish homicide, but insufficient to identify a perpetrator beyond reasonable doubt. Ballistic evidence confirmed multiple close-range gunshots, and the crime scene analysis strongly indicated a deliberate execution-style killing. However, without a recovered weapon, without direct eyewitness identification of the shooter, and without reliable forensic linkage to a specific suspect, the evidentiary chain remained incomplete. Witness testimony, which in many cases can provide critical narrative structure in homicide prosecutions, was limited by both time and circumstance. Many individuals connected to the broader social or criminal environment of the victim were unwilling to provide statements, often due to fear of retaliation or distrust of law enforcement. Others had relocated, changed identities, or simply could not be located as years passed. This erosion of testimonial reliability over time is one of the most significant obstacles in cold case prosecution, particularly in cases involving informal or transnational criminal networks where documentation is sparse and communication channels are deliberately concealed. The reopening of the investigation in 2024 represented an attempt to overcome these structural limitations through modern investigative methods. By revisiting archived evidence, reanalyzing forensic material, and applying updated analytical frameworks, investigators aim to identify inconsistencies or previously overlooked connections within the original case file. The collaboration with Europol further expanded the scope of the inquiry, allowing access to cross-border data and intelligence that may not have been available during the initial investigation in the 1990s. The public appeal component of the renewed investigation, including a documentary-style presentation of the case, also introduced a strategic shift toward community engagement. This approach acknowledged that over time, individuals who were once unwilling or afraid to speak might now be more willing to come forward, particularly as social dynamics change and the immediacy of past threats diminishes. The response to this campaign reportedly generated new information, though the precise nature of these leads has not been publicly detailed. What is known is that they were sufficient to advance the investigation to the point of identifying 3 potential suspects by early 2025. However, identification in an investigative context does not equate to legal culpability. It represents a threshold of suspicion that must still be tested against evidentiary standards. before any formal charges can be brought. The subsequent searches conducted in Hamburg and Sweden marked an important procedural escalation, indicating that authorities believed there was reasonable basis to examine locations and individuals associated with the suspects. These coordinated operations suggest that investigators were attempting to establish either direct physical evidence, communication records, or material links that could substantiate involvement in the killing. Yet, as of the latest available information, these efforts have not resulted in arrests or publicly announced charges. From a judicial perspective, the absence of a trial means that no adversarial testing of the investigative conclusions has occurred. No defense arguments have been presented, no judicial evaluation of evidence has taken place, and no formal determination of responsibility has been made. This leaves the case in a state of legal suspension, where suspicion exists but accountability has not been legally assigned. In practical terms, this means that the murder of Nenad Gajdanovic remains an open file within the justice system, subject to ongoing investigative activity but not yet capable of being resolved through court adjudication. The implications of this situation extend beyond the individual case. It reflects broader challenges faced by law enforcement in addressing historic homicides linked to complex social environments. With the passage of time, erodes evidence, weakens witness reliability, and disperses suspects across multiple jurisdictions. It also highlights the limitations of even modern investigative tools when foundational evidence is incomplete or when key participants in a criminal network remain silent. As a result, the legal status of the case remains unchanged at its core: no conviction, no acquittal, and no judicial closure. The investigation continues to exist in a space between past violence and present uncertainty, where progress is measured in leads and suspicions rather than verdicts. The death of Nenad Gajdanovic, known in investigative records as the Gajo 96 case, did not end with a verdict or a clear legal resolution, but instead entered a long period of silence that stretched across decades, shaping not only the investigative trajectory of the case, but also its broader meaning within the context of unresolved violence in post-Cold War Europe. In the immediate aftermath of the 1996 killing near Damerlohausen, the focus of authorities was necessarily procedural, identifying the victim, documenting the crime scene, and reconstructing the final movements that led him to that isolated stretch of road in Niedersachsen. But as the years passed and the case transitioned from active investigation into cold case status, its significance began to shift. It was no longer only about a single act of violence. It became part of a larger pattern of unresolved killings linked to fragmented criminal environments that had developed in the aftermath of the Yugoslav wars and the broader restructuring of transnational crime networks in Europe during the 1990s. One of the most immediate consequences of the unresolved nature of the case was the persistence of uncertainty for everyone indirectly connected to it, including individuals who may have known Gajdanovic personally or professionally. In cases where no perpetrator is identified and no legal closure is achieved, the absence of resolution often becomes its own form of psychological and social burden for those within the broader environment in which Gajdanovic moved. The lack of answers meant that suspicion and fear could continue to circulate indefinitely, untethered from any final judicial determination. This type of unresolved status is particularly significant in cases involving organized or semi-organized criminal contexts, where silence is often maintained not only through fear of legal consequences, but also through fear of internal retaliation or long-standing codes of loyalty and distrust. Over time, the Gajo 96 case became emblematic of the difficulties faced by law enforcement agencies when attempting to solve homicides embedded within transnational and socially fragmented environments. The passage of time introduced compounding challenges. Witnesses who might have been willing to speak in the immediate aftermath of the crime became harder to locate, their memories less precise, their willingness to engage further diminished by distance and the erosion of urgency. Physical evidence, while preserved, was limited by the forensic capabilities of the mid-1990s, a period in which DNA analysis and digital tracing were far less advanced than in later decades. As a result, the case file increasingly represented a static snapshot of an investigation frozen at an early stage, awaiting technological or informational developments that might one day allow it to be reactivated. That opportunity eventually emerged nearly 3 decades later, when renewed institutional interest led to the formation of a dedicated task force in 2024. This reopening of the case was not merely procedural, but symbolic, reflecting a broader shift in policing strategy across parts of Europe, where cold cases were increasingly revisited with the expectation that modern forensic tools, combined with new investigative frameworks, might yield results where earlier efforts had stalled. The reactivation of the Gajdanovic case under the designation Gajo 96 brought renewed attention not only from law enforcement agencies, but also from the public, through targeted media outreach and documentary-style presentations designed to reintroduce the facts of the case to potential witnesses. This strategy acknowledged an important reality. Time changes not only evidence, but also human behavior. Individuals who may have once been unwilling to come forward, whether due to fear, loyalty, or indifference, might later reassess their position as circumstances evolve. The response to this renewed outreach produced new investigative leads, although the specific content of those leads has not been publicly disclosed. What is known, however, is that by 2025, authorities had identified 3 individuals as potential suspects, marking the most significant development in the case in decades. The subsequent coordinated searches conducted in Hamburg and Sweden, supported by Europol, demonstrated that investigators were operating under the assumption that relevant evidence or individuals may have crossed national boundaries. This international dimension underscored the complexity of the case, reinforcing the likelihood that the events surrounding Gajdanovic's death were not confined to a single location or jurisdiction, but were instead embedded within a broader transnational context. Despite these developments, the absence of formal charges or arrests means that the case remains legally unresolved. This lack of judicial conclusion has important implications. In the absence of a court ruling, there is no authoritative determination of guilt, no formal presentation of evidence subjected to adversarial testing, and no legal closure for the events of August 8, 1996. The investigation continues to exist in a space defined by possibility rather than conclusion, where hypotheses have been formed, suspects identified, and operations conducted, but where definitive accountability has not yet been established. From a broader perspective, the Gajo 96 case highlights the enduring challenges of cold case investigations involving suspected organized crime. These challenges are not only technical, but structural. They involve the intersection of time, geography, and human behavior, where evidence degrades. Witnesses disperse, and institutional memory becomes fragmented. Even when modern investigative tools are applied, they must operate within the constraints of what remains available from the original crime. In cases like this, where the initial evidentiary foundation was limited and heavily dependent on circumstantial reconstruction, the passage of time amplifies uncertainty rather than resolving it. At the human level, the case also serves as a reminder of the unresolved nature of many violent deaths that occur outside the immediate visibility of public justice systems. For the victim, whose life ended abruptly on a remote road in rural Germany, there is no narrative closure beyond the reconstruction of his final movements and the forensic confirmation of how he died. For investigators, the case represents both persistence and limitation. Persistence in the ongoing effort to identify those responsible, and limitation in the structural barriers that have prevented definitive resolution for nearly 3 decades. The continued interest in the case, even after so many years, reflects a broader societal insistence that unresolved violence should not fade into obscurity. It also reflects the evolving capabilities of modern law enforcement, where cases once considered closed or dormant can be re-examined with new methods and renewed determination. Yet despite these advances, the core reality remains unchanged. The murder of Nenad Gajdanovic has not been judicially resolved. No court has determined responsibility, no verdict has been delivered, and no final accountability has been assigned. The case exists in a suspended state between history and present inquiry, defined by the tension between what is known and what remains unproven. In that sense, its aftermath is not a conclusion, but an ongoing process, one that continues to unfold within investigative files, international cooperation efforts, and the unanswered questions that still surround a quiet road in Niedersachsen where, in the summer of 1996, a life ended without explanation and has yet to receive one.